we're going to talk about Grindhouse today, the Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez film that came out in about 2007. It was a massive bomb. It was a real bomb. Like, it cost like $60 million and made very little, like $30 million. It was like, one of those films is like, when you see it, it's like, yeah, they spent too much money on this film. There's some stuff in here that, I mean, I don't know how much each one cost, but it looks like the Rodriguez film looks a lot more expensive. And the Tarantino film looks a lot cheaper and much more appropriate to the kind of film they're making, which is a Grindhouse. Like, Rodriguez does tend to have more money than a Grindhouse film would have. And it's shown in how he shoots some of this stuff. But that's just, like, nitpicking. I still really enjoy this film. It's a lot of fun. I do like the Tarantino one better than the Rodriguez one, but I like Planet Terror a lot as well. Now, the Grindhouses were the 60s and 70s, like, exploitation houses. Like, they'd be, like, rundown cinemas, you know, and you would go and see them. Sometimes there'd be, like, New York cinemas that were real grindhouses that were, like, sticky floors, people would get stabbed in and stuff like that, 42nd Street stuff. There was places in LA, there was places in all over the country that were grindhouses. There were second-run cinemas that would show the films that did not star Charlton Heston or Paul Newman or anything. They showed you films starring people like Will Smith, who recently died, stuff like that. Showed you basic exploitation films. And Roger Corman films. Films with a very limited budget, and they'd make them money going from place to place over a certain limited number of prints. So by the time you got the film, there's a good chance that the print had been scratched to hell because it was, you know, shown so many times. Because they weren't going to make tons of prints of any of these films. So that's what Grindhouse was. And they have all these scratches and reels missing in the film. Now each film is about an hour and a half long each. When the film bombed and they tried to release it in other countries, instead of having have the film as Grindhouse, they released it two films, which was Planet Terror and Death Proof, which meant that they added some stuff back in that cut out of these films. So each one's a bit longer. I think the Death Proof one was the one that succeeded better with that because it became a stronger film because you got some scenes that expanded the characters more, so you got more detail with the characters. Well, in the actual Grindhouse film, it's a much leaner film. Planet Terror, I can't remember what they added because it feels pretty much just like in Grindhouse, it's like the leanest version possible of that thing, and the other version just a bit longer, but it doesn't feel that different. Like, from memory, I can't remember what they changed because obviously it wasn't anything important. Well, in Death Proof, they added some sequences that were implied in the film, but it gave the film a different feel. So that was a very different film. Now, so I'll start with talking about Planet Terror. Planet Terror is basically a zombie movie. Very much like we saw in Army of the Dead recently, that Zack Snyder did. It's the same kind of thing. It's a cheesy zombie movie with a big budget where the zombies are pretty vicious, but also funny when you want them to be funny. So it switches between they're a threat, they're not that much of a threat. They're a threat, they're not much of a threat. So if you want to kill some characters off, they're a threat. If you want your hero to run through a hospital to get someone, get a love, the zombies can get beaten up quite easily. You know, it just depends what you need them to be. Either they're a threat or they're not a threat. They're more of a threat early on as no one's aware of what they are. And they're getting killed left, right and centre later on. But at the beginning, they can take people out pretty quickly and eat their brains and stuff because no one knows what they're dealing with. Later on, people with guns and stuff, so they're easy to kill. But every so often, when they need a bit of a threat, they'll become more threatening again. It's that kind of movie. It's not a criticism, that's just the way they are. I mean, the difference is in a George Romero film, a zombie film, the zombies are always consistently lumbering, but if you get close to them, they're a threat. You know, because they're hungry. But it's usually what the people are doing around them that defines how threatening they are. In this film, they do change competencies depending on what you need from the scene. You know, So you see, it's almost like there's some smart zombies and there's some other zombies that are not so smart. Because it has a cheesy film, it's not trying to be Night of the Living Dead. So it is more of an action movie. It's trying to be a part of like a John Carpenter type of movie. But John Carpenter tends to have more defined characteristics from his villains than this. This is much more looser. And it's trying to be much more smart. I like an idea of a zombie film, like an 80s. It's trying to be a canon movie, basically. Which is the thing I find weird. It's shot like a 70s Grindhouse movie, but it has the aesthetics and the drive of a canon movie. I've tried a canon movie rip-off. That's the big thing I feel about it. But it's a feminist canon movie rip-off, where you've got the kind of lead character, who's this Mexican, because Robert Rodriguez is Mexican. So he's a hero rather than the white guys, which happens a lot in Rodriguez films. That's cool, he's Mexican, why not? So you've got lots of different characters, but there's also these women characters who prove they're strong for the film, which is not very canon-like, honestly, because they tend to stick with the Chuck Norris and Chuck Bronson stuff. And the lead character in this one would be too small for a canon film, but that's kind of the joke in this one. So it doesn't really matter. But it's that thing, it seems to be trying to take the canon stuff and twisting it. So that's why it does feel a bit weird as one a Grindhouse. It seems a bit too big a budget compared to a Grindhouse film. It feels much of a canon type of budget. So that's how weird it is, because you've got like Bruce Willis is a guy who shot Bin Laden years before everyone knew, and he got infected, him and his men get infected, and they're trying to do something with these zombies with this thing, which is a criminal, comic booky kind of villain of making zombies sort of from anywhere. So and there's all these labs and stuff, and people are trapped in labs, and the labs aren't that expensive looking, and again very canony. And you've also got hospitals, local hospitals. You know, it just feels very canony, even though it's meant to be a Grindhouse thing. And you've got all these other characters, like Michael Biehn turns up, him and Jeff Fahey are brothers, but they're rivals, and there's a family recipe, which Michael Biehn character wants. There's a bunch of other stuff. Rose McGowan's kind of the lead, and Freddy Rodriguez, and they work fine. I mean, they're not given much to do. I mean, Rose McGowan probably steals this one. How Malice Shelton is the female lead, because they've got some personality. I mean, the lead guy is okay, but he's not amazing. It's like he's kind of like they couldn't get Rodriguez could not get Antonio Banderas. That's what it feels like. It feels like you're not getting someone who's a top star, or even like a lower level star who can know how to do this kind of stuff. It feels like you're getting a guy who would be a sporting actor normally, and it doesn't really come off. But yeah, this one's probably more flawed than acting, really, because it relies on actors like Michael Biehn who are good. Bruce Willis comes in and does a parody of his normal performance. All those certain actors really pop, even though they don't have that great dialogue. They know how to deliver it to make it pop. There's other ones who just come in and seem to waste time. And Josh Brolin turns up and he's really good. And, you know, Nicky Cat turns up and he's fun. There's lots of fun cameos. They're trying to space out of a lot of characters within the zombie fights, which works, but it depends on the actor, really, to how good or bad it is. The worst offender actually is Tarantino turns up as a kind of villainous soldier, and one, he does not look like he should have ever been in the army. Even though he's tall, he does not look like an army guy at all. And two, they needed someone like Michael Madsen there to make a threat possible. You need a threat in this section of the film, and you've got Tarantino as a threat, and it doesn't work. He's not threatening. He's never threatening in this film. And that's the problem with Rodriguez, is he casts actors and lets them go, but sometimes he's miscast them and doesn't know when to say, nah, maybe I've done a mistake there. You know, that's the thing. That's why his films are so bitty. Like, he tends to be a bit weak in casting. And his plots tend to be very generic, so it relies on his style. This one, there's a lot of style. He's having a lot of fun. He's doing a lot of stuff with the like close-ups and backgrounds and characters in different spaces, and lots of stuff with syringes and things that all work. It's still a blast. It's still a really enjoyable film. And actually, the flaws in it, like a weak lead, are the kind of flaws you get in some of these films anyway. So it doesn't really matter as much. It doesn't really bug you because it's meant to be a parody. But you can see where the film could have been better if they'd cast it slightly better. It's that kind of film. But it is fun. It is enjoyable. The zombie kills are fun, but not that inventive. That's the big problem with the film generally, is the kills they have aren't inventive generally in this film. It's a real flaw. In between the films, you get some trailers, and before Planet Terror, you get the Machete trailer, which was the trailer for the film that actually happened with Danny Trejo as Machete later on, when you realised everyone loved that trailer. You know, and then there was a sequel. And I actually like Machete film more than I like Planet Terror, to be honest. It's a nice, silly film with Danny Trejo as a lead. You've got a really good lead actor in it. Then you get other trailers. You get Werewolves of the SAS that Rob Zombie did with Nicolas Cage's Fu Manchu and You Do Care. And that's fun. Don't, with Edgar Wright did. It's probably my favourite of the trailers. That's a way over the top British horror film with lots of British actors you see been seen for like 2 seconds. Is don't. That's the best one. That's the most fun one. And to me, that was the film where you want to see the film of. Then we have Thanksgiving, and Eli Roth Thanksgiving slasher movie. That looks fun, but you're kind of glad you never saw the film, because I don't think the film would live up to I think it's a case of they put everything good in the trailer type of film. That's the film they're parodying. You think people say, "Oh, I would love to see that film." It's like, you probably wouldn't. The best stuff is the trailer. That's what you see in most of these slasher movies, is everything's good in the trailer and the rest is the filler. And that's what the film does. It's kind of a parody of that. So, I mean, all the trailers are fun, but the Edgar Wright one really works best for me. And the Machete one. Then you get to Death Proof itself, which is the Tarantino film within this film. And to me, it's a better one. I do prefer the longer version. I think the longer version is creepier. And it does do something that, because the character stuff's more interesting in the director's cut, or the longer cut, it just makes a more full of experience. But this version that's in the Grindhouse film is perfect for the Grindhouse film. If you made it longer in this version of the film, with the 2 films, hour and a half each, it would have slowed the movie down quite a bit. So they made the right decision of having this shorter here. But I would definitely recommend seeing the longer cut, because it is a better film. But in this one, it's Tarantino doing a slasher movie where the slasher is a car. So it is the car from the James Brolin film, or the truck, the truck from Jaws. But instead of just having it there, he has it almost like Michael Myers type of thing, where you see him for a bit, it appears once in a while, but you're actually doing the Halloween thing of getting to know the characters. So getting to know the people who he's actually stalking. And that's the important thing the film is, it's about a set of characters. This is one of my, actually, apart from one little problem I've got at the end, this is one of my favourite Tarantino films. Because I think the characterization is more interesting in this one. And it's all about the characters, because it's basically 2 sets of women. You get one set at the beginning for the first 45 minutes, then you get another set at the second half of the film. So within a film of 2 halves, this is cut into 2 halves again, in a very literal way. And you've got a kind of narrative for the first half is how these women tease each other and play around with each other's affections, and how they're doing with the boys, how they're going to bars and chatting with each other and just teasing. You've got the hierarchy where Jungle Julia character, who's the DJ, she's kind of the lead, and in that normal sense of she's the popular person, but the lead is actually a character called Buttercup, who's actually the person visiting. She's almost like the sensitive girl who's actually noticing things, like they're being followed and stuff. But it's done in a realistic way. Instead of her always been that she's kind of got her own problems, so she's half notices but half doesn't, the way a normal person would deal with that. So are they foreigners or not? Well, there's other things to deal with. I'm probably paranoid, that kind of thing, which works really well. You've got another character, blonde, who's the more disposable of the three characters. Intentionally, that's kind of the joke. It's the character who's got less to do, but who's more bitchy than other characters. And they run into other characters. Tarantino shows up again as an actor here, but it's much better in this one. He's playing a bar owner, and that's fine. There's not a problem. Rose McGowan turns up as well, playing a different character in this one. The idea of these exploitation movies, actors would go to different films. So they would show up in one and then another and be weird links and things. So that works. A couple of characters from Death Proof, also from Planet Terror, also done on Death Proof, play the same characters. It's almost like a prequel to the film you've just seen. So this is a prequel as well to a zombie movie, which they're doing with Army of the Dead as well. Yeah, Army of the Dead has a lot. They probably love this film, Army of the Dead people. So there's that going on, but there's also just a slasher movie. But it's a slasher movie that takes the Silence of the Lambs idea, or the Halloween idea, is more impact if less happens in slasher things, but if you like the characters or know the characters, then something bad happens to them, then you're much more impacted. There's only 2 set pieces in the film, and one's better than the other. But my idea what the better one is probably not whatever. Everyone's view of the better one. My view of the better one's the first half. The first half's the best part of the film, for me, as you get to the characters. There's a threat of Kurt Russell in the bar with them. He's talking to Rose McGowan. He's talking to them a little bit. He's acting as if he doesn't know them, but he does. And you know there's something off. And he is kind of a big bad wolf thing. And there is like a fairy tale element to this film where, like a dark European fairy tale where, he's a representation of the worst nightmare, and he says a little poem to Buttercup that has been teased earlier on, and it comes full circle and it becomes like your worst nightmare of a beau coming for you, that kind of thing. That's the kind of feeling it's got, this kind of dark romantic element, dark gothic thing, like a fairy tale kind of element to it, which gives it a really interesting drive through the story, because he is almost like the worst nightmare coming true, and the poem bit just really works well. And Kurt Russell is great as stuntman Mike, who's just charming when he wants to be, but as soon as he's getting his way, the guard comes down, you see a really nasty, petty man who's frustrated and awful, and Russell plays it to hell, because he's never an actor who cares that much of his reputation. He's always like, he plays nasty characters and plays them nasty. He doesn't try and say, hey, I'm not like that. He doesn't do that. He's not an actor who does that. So he plays the charm when he wants to play charm. But when you see him in the camera with McGowan, when he's got trapped, the nasty side comes out and you think, oh, this guy's really scary. That's the best part of the film, is when he's interacting with the women, and there's something off about him, but he's still charming, and he gets some sympathy because no one knows who he is, and he's a has-been. There's that kind of feeling, but this is almost like, this is a kind of slasher version of the movie Crash with David Cronenberg. You know, because in Crash there was lots of old stuntmen as well. There's that same kind of feel to it, but it's a slasher version of it. And he's getting up and killing people in car crashes, and it's dark and twisted. And Kurt Russell really plays it. Kurt Russell was really terrific in it. And when the first crash happens, because you're seeing it and you're seeing cut again, different angles as each victim gets killed through this one crash. Not like a slasher movie, you're seeing people killed off one by one. That's when they're killed all at the same time. But it cuts back and sees each person being killed in different angles as the crash happens. Which is really creepy but still really affecting, because you get to like these characters and they die in horrible ways in this one car crash, and it's unforgivable, and it sets up Kurt Russell as a really nasty piece of work. And then it cuts away and it shows you these other 3 characters, or 4 characters, who are women working the film. And this is where I think the film was undone by certain people who didn't like it. The idea of this narrative that you've had these 3 or 4 characters and you think you're going to continue with them, and then suddenly, no, you're not. They're dead. You liked them and they're dead. And you're seeing Kurt Russell's character based as, for him, they were just images for him for whatever he wanted. And he had to like them in a certain way, which makes it creepy because you're implied by your interactions with the characters. Now you're seeing these other characters who are going to face the same threat, and there's a sense of, you know it's coming. You've seen them watching them, you know what's coming. They're his next victims, and it's what happens with that. And that's where the film goes from being really interesting and dark to being just a exploitation movie. Because it follows exploitation rules where they turn the... you get to know the characters, they're threatened by Kurt Russell, and they turn the tide on him, and they actually beat him up and beat the crap out of him. And it becomes an exploitation movie. There's a big car chase. And this is where I think Tarantino's at his weakest, because in this and Kill Bill is the same thing, where he sets up this stuff so well, and then suddenly he gets to the actual action, it's just okay. It's like he puts so much into filming these stunts for real and getting real stuntmen doing them. But the thing is, it's just the same gag again and again. Some person's trapped in a roof of a car. It looks dangerous, but the cars banging into each other, and that's it. That's all you're getting in that sequence. It's dangerous because it's dangerous with how they're doing it. It's not thrilling though, it's just like dangerous. It's nothing... There's no wonderful, like, weird twists on what's happening. It's for one time he doesn't do any twists or anything. When he does action scenes, he just stops doing that stuff, and it's like, this is not as good as it should be. It's not as good as something like Ronin, where John Frankenheimer did the car chase in Ronin. It's not as good as that. It's not as good as a lot of stuff that we've seen car chases that somebody's used CGI. They're more thrilling than this. This just feels like a good, well-shot car chase, but it's nothing special. And you compare it to something like French Connection car chase, and it's nothing. You know, I mean, some of the stuff they're doing in Speed is so much more impressive. And, you know, and they didn't have that much CGI in Speed, really, because most of it was buses and stuff. This one is just like a car chase, and it's like, it's not good enough. It's just fine, but it's not great. And it's sort of disappointing because the rest of the film's so good, and suddenly there's a car chase and it's okay. And the other car bit was so good as well, and it's like, well, why you not just invent interesting things to happen, rather than just focus on, well, shooting it natural, so that's the scare. And it's like, it's not really. And then in the end, it's just like, they've set up this great villain, and all that happens is he gets beaten up. And maybe he was killed, maybe they killed him at the end. There's a, at the end, Rosario Dawson just puts her foot down in his skull, so it could be his skull's getting crushed, I don't know, but it's like suddenly, yes, an exploitation, and they're going back to that convention, and that's one thing about Tarantino. He is very conservative in that way. He always goes back to convention. He tweaks it along a lot of ways, but I always find his endings to be, a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, fairly disappointing, because he always goes back to some sort of weird convention. It's always like, you never really, you did all this build up and you never really delivered in the final few minutes. That's for me, at least. That's one thing I find about him. And that's the point with this film is like, the ending's kind of like weak compared to the rest of it. The rest of it's terrific. I know I'm in a minority in this one. I don't care. I know it's not as well most liked film by most people, and a lot of people say, it's just the ending is good. I think it's the other way around. It's like, everything else is good until the ending. I saw this projected for the first time when I watched it this time, so it was more impressive seeing the projection with all the shots and different people's angles and things. It does have more impact, but the ending still felt kind of like, that's okay, but it's not what I was hoping for. Even though I've seen it, I was hoping for me saw on the big screen you'd actually have more impact for the car chase. It's like, it's good, but it's not great. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back soon with some more. Right, bye for now.